It's been over a decade since the Steins Gate movie came out, and in the past 10 years, a lot has happened. Chaos Child, Steins Gate Zero, Occultic 9, and of course, Anonymous Code. And for English-speaking fans, we happen to get over 90% of the series translated in that time. So with all this newer context, we see the Steins Gate movie in a considerably different light. For a long time, the Steins Gate movie was simply disregarded by people as some non-canon okakuri fanservice movie that completely ignored the rules the original story had built. But in recent times, the narrative surrounding the movie has shifted substantially. In truth, Steins Gate Lode Region of Deja Vu can absolutely be considered canon.
And because SciADV doesn't have a traditionally defined canon the way that a franchise like Star Wars does, it's a bit of a silly term to use. So I'm going to use it in the broad sense to refer to canon as a part of a series that you can very reasonably conclude is an official event that definitively takes place within the series and is consistent both with what occurs before and after itself.
Just a heads up before continuing further, the first half of this video contains spoilers for the entire Steins Gate subseries. This includes all animated, visual novel, and side material content. The second half of this video contains spoilers for the entire Science Adventure series, from Chaos at Noah all the way to Anonymous Code. Steins Gate is just the second part of a longer story, and you will never fully understand it without the context of the rest of the series. So I do inevitably have to discuss full series content to completely explain why the movie is canon. Anyways, let's get into the heart of the video. Until recently, the movie was grossly misunderstood by the English fandom, largely due to misinterpreting parts of the story and lacking wider series context. By now, most ardent SciADV fans are very much aware of why the movie is canon, but some of you might still not entirely understand why this is the case. In this video, I'll take a deep dive into why the Steins Gate movie is, for the lack of a better term, canon. So let's start with discussing the three main reasons why English-speaking fans thought it wasn't canon. Firstly, that it was anime original. Secondly, that it contradicts Steins Gate's sequel novella, Holy Day. And thirdly, and most commonly, that it contradicts the established rules of the series. I'll address the weakest point first. A lot of people believe that because the movie is anime original, it isn't canon. And frankly speaking, I think it's really silly to just immediately dismiss something anime original as non-canon when this was produced and created by the original writers of the VN. The movie was produced by the franchise's original creator, Chumaru Shikura, and the scenario for the film was supervised by the Steins Gate VNs and SciADV franchise's lead writer, Naotake Hayashi, as well as series producer Tatsuya Matsubara. Think about this logically. You had some of the most important creators of the series deeply involved in the making of Lode Region of Deja Vu. If the original staff made this film, why would you automatically dismiss it as non-canon? Chumaru Shikura literally went on record to say that the Steins Gate movie was a story he really wanted to make, as if that didn't give enough hints. Additionally, Lode Region of Deja Vu technically released in 3 mediums simultaneously. It wasn't just a film. It also released in manga and light novel forms, which I will talk about in my point on Holy Day. And it's long been established in this franchise that manga and light novel side material is canon, so why couldn't anime original content be canon either? It's literally made by the creators of the VN. Look no further than the Occultic 9 anime, which was half anime original and half the source material for the series. Technically for Occultic 9, all 4 mediums' versions of the story are canon, but we won't be getting into that. But what I will get into is the other big precedent set by SciADV anime, the Steins Gate Zero anime, which is, in large part, an anime original sequel or final route to the Steins Gate Zero visual novel, not a conventional adaptation. And we know that the Steins Gate Zero anime is canon because future SciADV entries reference content and world lines exclusive to the Steins Gate Zero anime. So from Occultic 9 to Steins Gate Zero, we have multiple precedents within the series that anime original content is canon and referenced by non-animated material. Therefore, pointing at the movie and pretending that being anime original makes it automatically non-canon when SciADV has always been a mass multimedia franchise is very silly. The next thing I want to discuss is the belief that it contradicts Holy Day. If you don't know what Holy Day of the Calamitous Birth is, it, just like Load Region of Deja Vu, is one of Steins Gate's many epilogues or sequels. In part, it also serves to bridge Steins Gate to robotics notes. This point was brought up a lot by SciADV fans in the past because the events of Holy Day are alluded to within the robotics notes subseries. And the anime version of Load Region of Deja Vu contradicts a few minor details from Holy Day, namely the frequency at which Okabe and Kurisu keep in touch with one another. In the movie, they state that Okabe didn't email Kurisu once since the summer of 2010. However, in Holy Day, Okabe emails Kurisu in December of 2010. So even if it's a really minute detail, that still seems like a contradiction. Moreover, there's an additional contradiction with respect to future gadget number 10. In Holy Day, Okabe brings up two unnumbered future gadgets following the phone wave, which are the Cellulaser gun and the Go-Go Getter Bot Mark III, which are implied to be future gadgets 9 and 10. However, in the Steins Gate movie, future gadget 10, as is presented after Okabe's disappearance from the world, is the Cool Visitor, which is neither of the two unnumbered future gadgets seen in Holy Day. So clearly, there are indeed contradictions between Holy Day and the movie. However, Holy Day also contradicts the original Steins Gate VN vis-a-vis Okabe naming future gadgets before finishing them. The Steins Gate VN establishes that they only name future gadgets once they finish them. But in Holy Day, he names them just as he's starting development. You could still try to explain this as Okabe changing his gadget creation process over time, or you can alternatively explain this by Okabe lying to Mr. Braun to save face, thereby not necessitating a contradiction. But you'll find all sorts of minute discrepancies like these within different pieces of media in the Steins Gate subseries, which you can't exactly use as evidence for saying something is non-canon over something else. Furthermore, how significant are these differences between Holy Day and the movie to begin with? They're not significant enough to immediately render the movie non-canon. Why? Because firstly, he doesn't number the future gadgets in Holy Day, and could have even scrapped them altogether in favor of the finalized future gadgets 9 and 10 seen in the movie, assuming that those gadgets were actually real and not lies made by Okabe to save face. And secondly, the novelization of Load Region of Deja Vu actually alludes to the events of Holy Day, bridging the two stories together and reconciling some of their differences. The novelization is 2 volumes long and also covers the OVA Egoistic Poryomania, as well as some other bonus stories never before seen. Within it, they have a story taking place in parallel to the events of Holy Day on Christmas Eve, but from Kurisu's perspective, where Mayuri sends Kurisu a Christmas letter. At both the beginning and ending of that chapter, she talks about how Okabe hadn't responded to her most recent email, which we see within Holy Day. As such, there is a proper sequence of events incorporating all 3 of Holy Day, Egoistic Poryomania, and Load Region of Deja Vu. So even if there's a few small contradictions between Holy Day and the anime version of Load Region of Deja Vu, there aren't quite as many between Holy Day and the movie's novelization. The main contradiction that remains is with respect to the future gadgets. In the movie's novelization, future gadget number 9 is a 6-digit clock made from half a Dr. Pepper bottle, and future gadget number 10 is the Cool Visitor, just like it is in the movie itself. Therefore, we can safely say that there's been a novelized attempt to reconcile the minute differences seen between Steins Gate's different sequels, but I'll discuss more on this point towards the end of the video where I can discuss full series context. So let's move on to the third main reason people tend to give when arguing against the movie's canonicity, which is that it contradicts the established rules of the series. One of the longest running misconceptions from fans of the franchise stems from completely believing in Suzuha's in-story explanation for Okabe's whereabouts. She states that Okabe has moved from the Steins Gate world line to the so-called R world line. Steins Gate long since establishes that there can only be one active world line at a time, and therefore, 2 can't exist simultaneously. Each world line is just a possibility until it is made active, and when made active, all other world lines cease to exist. So at first glance, This seems to contradict the rules of the series. There can't be two world lines at once. But think about it logically for a second. What is the so-called R world line? It's a space that the universe forces its paradoxes into. Like Okabe, whose reading Steiner has made him an error so great, the universe forces him out the world. So just definitionally, it's not actually a world line. The Steins Gate Zero world line tip defines it as follows. This term refers to an infinite number of possible worlds. However, these worlds do not exist in parallel. Only one exists at a given time. In other words, a world line is a possible world, not a recycling bin the universe sends its errors to. After all, you don't see anybody inside that world except for Okabe. So as you can see, the R world line isn't actually a world line. Suzuha and Kurisu just call it that because they have no idea what else to call this place. Load Region of Deja Vu, released alongside a drama CD entitled A Posteriori Existence, which delves into future Kurisu and Suzuha's discussions on the matter. And it ultimately highlights how they're completely baffled by the nature of the space Okabe exists in. Not knowing what else to call it, they just call it the R world line, even though it's not actually a world line. And it would not be the first time that characters refer to something using improper terminology. Time and time again, people would refer to the alpha attractor field as the alpha world line. So clearly, this is not anything unusual within the franchise. Moreover, the movie's novelization itself also explicitly confirms that the R world line isn't actually a world line towards the end of Volume 2 on page 281. The passage describes the space Okabe exists in as a monochrome world, only a world line in concept, not in reality. Rather, the space he's in is more akin to a trash can filled with inconvenient memories discarded from the world line. As the novel puts it, he's become no more than a reading Steiner concept. But of course, there's much more to this. From this point onwards in the video, I will be discussing content from the entire SciADV franchise. That includes everything from Chaos and Noah to Anonymous Code and all side material. You have been warned. If you've read Anonymous Code, then yeah, it should be extremely obvious why it doesn't contradict the rules of the series. After all, we have world layers, and of course, the moment in story where they go beyond the load region. But we go beyond the load region at multiple other points in the series, including one of Steins Gate's other sequels, Variant Space Octet, when Okabe meets Takumi at the end. And we also see this in episode 12 of the Occultic Night anime, when Gamon meets his father's ghost. But let's ignore all that for now and go back to a route from the series' very first entry, because the logic behind the existence of the load region and beyond the load region was always there. The center route. SciADV's most mind-blowing, series-defining character route reveals several crucial aspects about the series. If you were to believe the people typing through the terminal, then 1. The series takes place in a multi-layered simulation. 2. The simulation has self-regulating mechanisms such as the debuggers. And 3. It's possible for errors to bypass the simulation's self-regulating mechanisms, like the coin locker baby at the route's end. And it's specifically the last of these 3 implications that's the most important for our understanding of the Steins Gate movie, because it introduces this concept of the paradox threshold. So right from the start of the franchise, you're already introduced to the simulation's self-correcting structures. If you played Chaos and Noah before Steins Gate like you're supposed to, then you get the sense that the R world line, or rather the space beyond the load region, might be yet another one of the simulation's corrective measures. So the Steins Gate movie never ignored the rules of the series. It simply expanded upon them. As Momose describes in the Roots post-credit scene, the baby is an error that's allowed to remain within the simulation because it simply isn't severe enough of an error to warrant correcting. The simulation itself also considers Okabe to be the exact same thing until he passes a certain point. In load region of Deja Vu, Okabe eventually disappears from the world because the strength of his reading Steiner and accumulated memories make his continued existence too great of an error for him to continue existing within the simulation. That's why Kurisu's goal within the movie is to give Okabe a memory so strong it exceeds the strength of his reading Steiner and keeps him grounded to reality. In this way, he is no longer considered an error too great to exist within the simulation. By the time you get to the ending of Anonymous Code, you more or less get confirmation of where Okabe actually gets sent. Okabe isn't just forced into a universal trash compactor. Rather, being sent to what Kurisu calls the R-World line is outright being unloaded from the simulation itself. After all, the space beyond the load region is the unobserved part of the simulation, where Gaia handles its errors. Senna talks about how the world is composed of zeros, ones, and minus ones. Outside the load region is that minus one of the world. It's effectively the same thing as the Dirac Sea from the Chaos series and the Ghost World from Occultic 9. It's where loose, otherwise erroneous data is stored, the simulation's actual trash compactor. From Occultic 9, we know that the simulation stores ghost data beyond the load region in case it has to rewind and call upon it. That's why Gamon is able to meet his dad at the end of Occultic 9. But anyways, we know damn well that this place beyond the load region is completely consistent with the series' mechanics and also seen at multiple points throughout the franchise. But why does this mean we can consider the movie canon per se? The answer is simple. World layers. We've known vaguely about world layers ever since Chaos had Noah, when they revealed that the series was in a multi-layered simulation, and we increasingly got more hints on world layers over the years as Chiyomaru was constantly talking about them in his interviews and twitcasting livestreams. But where we first get proper in-story explanations of world layers is in Anonymous Code, which defines world layers as levels within a multi-layered simulation. If you had a simulation inside a simulation inside a simulation and so on and so forth, each simulation within that structure is what you'd call a world layer. There are practically an infinite number of these world layers, allowing for anything to potentially be observed. Ultimately, what happens within each world layer is the result of whatever parameters the layer above allows for. So you can observe pretty much any outcome depending on what those parameters are, including variations of a world line past 7 digits. In this sense, pretty much everything in the Science Adventure series can be considered canon because it can happen on any world layer. So because of world layers, you can have different versions of the Steins Gate world line, which is what we see with Robotics Notes Dash's chronologically overlapping character roots, and Steins Gate's chronologically overlapping sequels. They all just take place on different layers within Gaia. In the first place, as we know from Anonymous Code, what the divergence meter actually measures is the similarity that a present world layer has to a world layer above it. After all, the M2037 model of the divergence meter shows world line divergences to far more decimal places than the original 7-digit Nixie2 model does. So all of Steins Gate's sequels and their respective versions across different forms of media can simultaneously be considered canon despite their differences. This way, Variant Space Octet, Load Region of Deja Vu, and Holy Day of the Calamitous Birth can all happen at the same time. They just happen to be on different levels in the simulation. Now, I wanted to go further back to what I was saying before about how the movie contradicted Holy Day, and how Holy Day was referenced in the Robotics Notes subseries. Each of the aforementioned Steins Gate sequels have their relevance beyond the subseries. They are all important in some way, shape, or form. Variant Space Octet elaborates on the concept of the Black Knight as this skyclad observer, and introduces this idea of how every use of Giglomania can change the world line because it's a form of interference, both of which are huge aspects to the story of Anonymous Code. Load Region of Deja Vu introduces the concept of going beyond the load region, which shows up again in Occultic 9 and Anonymous Code. And of course, the events of Holy Day of the Calamitous Birth are alluded to in the Robotics Notes subseries via Naya's discussions on her past. So all these Steins Gate sequels have clear, wider series importance, and you couldn't put any one of them above the others, even if you wanted to. They are all canon.
To summarize, the Steins Gate movie can be considered canon because World Layers have made pretty much everything officially released in SciADV canon, if at that point you even still consider canon to be a concept to begin with. On some world layer, in some Earth simulator, everything released in SciADV can be observed. The three main reasons that people thought were why the Steins Gate movie was non-canon lacked wider series context and were misinformed. While anime original, the movie was the vision of series creator Chiyomaru Shikura and supervised by lead scenario writer Nao Takahayashi and series producer Tatsuya Matsubara. While the movie does slightly contradict Holiday, the light novel version of the movie incorporates both their events into one single narrative, and the concept of world layers means that they can simultaneously take place anyways. And lastly, the R world line is not a world line, it's outside the load region, which we repeatedly see throughout SciADV. Therefore, it does not contradict the rules of the series. With that in mind, thanks for watching. This was my first time making a SciADV related video, so I would greatly appreciate some suggestions for improvement. Thank you.